Our guest today is a friend of mine. Ben Shapiro is 32 years old and has written 6 books, has made many appearances on various news programs, and is editor-in-chief at the Daily Wire. Ben is also host of 2 radio programs, and he is the co-founder and former editor-in-chief of Truth Revolt and was senior editor at Breitbart. It is my pleasure to welcome Ben Shapiro to the Aminoff Effect. Ben, welcome to our show. Thank you for coming. You're a man of diverse talent. You're the author of 8 books. You're a nationally syndicated columnist, which you've been since you were 17 years old. You're the editor of the Daily Wire and the editor-at-large for Breitbart.com. You're on 2 daily radio shows. Keeps you busy. What is it that motivates you to do all this?
Well, you know, I'm somebody who's always considered my mission to be using my skills to best effect in whichever way that I could. So right now I think that the political debate is the most important debate the country can have, and however I can utilize the skill set that I have to make a difference, that's been my mission.
And you have quite a skill set.
Cultivate it.
You've been in a lot of TV shows, and you've appeared before student bodies, and you've made a name for yourself standing up for liberty and
I appreciate it. Thank you.
For America. You've been quoted as saying that the difference to be made in American culture is not necessarily through the traditional means of politics. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that when you look at the numbers, when you look at how many people closely follow politics, it's pretty minute. I mean, most Americans don't follow it that closely. Most Americans don't care about politics. Most Americans are influenced by the culture that they see and hear. Many, many more Americans watched the Grammys last night than will ever watch or take seriously an entire Republican political debate. If they're watching right now the debates, it's largely because of Trump. But the fact is that Justice Scalia died over the weekend, and with Justice Scalia's death, they did a poll, and they found that a plurality of Americans didn't know who Justice Scalia was. My guess is that if you polled Americans, asked them to name all 9 justices on the Supreme Court, less than 5% of Americans probably could. But if you ask Americans who Taylor Swift is, then pretty much 100% of Americans would know. Which is to say that if you're going to appeal to people on a political basis or on a moral basis, you have to speak to them in the language that they understand, and that's the language of storytelling and culture, not necessarily the language of Heritage Foundation white papers, as important as they may be.
Do you feel that it presents a danger to America that so many people are politically uninformed, in that they are making decisions about electing people without having real information? They're doing it on the basis, to a great extent, of emotion. Does that affect our democracy?
I mean, it certainly does, but I think that it really is a combination of being politically uninformed and yet politically active. If you want to be politically uninformed, just don't be politically active. Go about your daily life, engage in your business, take care of your family, do what it is that you want to do. That's America. But don't pretend that you're politically informed and become politically active when you don't know what you're doing. That does an enormous amount of damage to the republic. I mean, I've always wondered at people who say, yeah, we need more Americans voting. Which Americans do we need voting who aren't voting, as a general matter? No one's being prevented from going to the polls. If they are, that's illegal. So assuming that people are voting because they want to vote, which Americans do we desperately need to show up who are not showing up? I think right now there are probably too many Americans who are showing up to the polls who don't know what they're even talking about, don't know who the candidates are, other than they once saw them dance on Ellen.
Right. Well, there are some people who think that presents a problem for our republic, that you have so many people voting who really are not informed on the issues or on the people they're voting for.
Of course. I mean, I spoke for Rock the Vote one time in Michigan. This is why I'll never speak for Rock the Vote again, because Rock the Vote's basic premise is we need more people voting. And I remember one of the students got up in the crowd and asked me, how do we get more young people to vote? And I said, I don't want more young people to vote. Young people are stupid. Needless to say, I did not get a return invite from MTV and Rock the Vote.
Yes, I would guess. So Justice Scalia has passed away. Do you think that means that this election is going to be a referendum on who the next Supreme Court justice is going to be?
I mean, at least in part, you would think. But again, when you have an electorate that basically judges politicians based on whether they think that they're nice people or care about people like them, I doubt it'll be all that highfalutin. I think that people who watch it will say yes, but I think that most Americans will instead get caught up in the horse race of it and decide, do they like Trump as a person better than they like Hillary as a person? And we saw this in 2012. Every exit poll showed that Mitt Romney won on the issues, except for which candidate cares more about people like you, and there Obama blew him out 82-18, and that was the entire ball game. So it's much more based on persona and perceived character than it is based on what policies should be put forward. Most people don't even know what the Supreme Court does. They don't know what its jurisdiction is. They don't know what cases it's going to decide. They don't understand its role in the constitutional system. So, as I said, if only 32% of Americans didn't know who Justice Scalia was at all, then I highly doubt that the majority of Americans are going to be deciding the election based on the difference between Loretta Lynch's view of justice and Justice Scalia's view of justice, even though those are about as variant as it's possible to be.
Sad commentary on our country.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't think that most Americans follow this stuff closely. I think most Americans want to be left alone to pursue what it is they want to pursue, and then they're told that they have to vote. They're told it's their civic duty to vote. They're told it's their civic duty to be involved, and it isn't. I mean, it's not your civic duty to be involved. It's your civic duty to not break the law. But if you're not going to be politically involved, then if you're not politically knowledgeable, please don't be politically active, because there are those of us who actually care about constitutional ideals. And if you're voting just because you like President Obama's suits or because you think Hillary Clinton will be a charming first woman president because she's a woman, stay home.
Interestingly, Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist, attracts a majority, in fact, about 70% of a whole generation of young people under 35 in the United States of America. So what do you think is the reason for that? Why are young people attracted to bigger government and socialism rather than to capitalism and free markets and the ability to do whatever you want to do to make a success of yourself in life?
Well, I think that there are a few different reasons for that. I think one is just historical ignorance. Most people, I mean, I was born in 1984, so I don't remember the Soviet Union. Right? By the time I'm old enough to remember things happening, the Soviet Union wasn't around. The Berlin Wall had already fallen. So, for people who are my age and younger, what do they care what the Soviet Union was? What do they care what communism looked like? Communism doesn't look like the Soviet Union. Communism looks like Denmark. And Denmark can't be that bad. After all, people in Denmark seem to be relatively happy, and they seem to be doing okay economically, even though their growth rates are basically pretty close to nil, and now they're having to cut their own tax rates and all of this stuff. So that's one reason, is because of just historical ignorance. The second is you have a bunch of spoiled rich people, and that's the entire United States. I'm not just talking about the rich here. I'm talking about everyone in the United States is so far above historical norms in terms of living standard that it's easy to look around and go, okay, it's always going to be like this. It's always going to be wonderful. We can always have the new iPhone. What we really need now is we need John Rawls's justice. We need a redistributionist fairness. And young people are always looking for a way to change the world and fight for something. And what are they supposed to fight for? Free markets? I mean, they don't even know what a free market is or what it looks like, but it's easy for them to point at the person who's poor and say, well, that person's poor, therefore something unjust has happened. We must take down the guy next to him who's rich. He must have somehow done something wrong. It's a very elementary form of political persuasion, but that's what a lot of young people are falling for. They want to change the world, and the world they live in is capitalist, or at least corporatist. It really isn't capitalist, but it's corporatist. And so let's move more in the direction of redistributionism, and I'll make a difference, and I can get over my own biases and my own wealth by I can alleviate the guilt for all of these things by suggesting that we put government in charge to redistribute everything and make things fairer.
And what do you think that portends for the future of America?
I mean, I think that it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think that there are too many young people who don't understand that not only is socialism immoral, but it's also ineffective. That in the end, what you're going to end up with is a lot more poor people, not a bunch of people who are middle class. That what ends up happening is that all of the creative class who end up actually creating the jobs and products we like, those people are going to not have incentive to produce anymore. When people like Bernie Sanders talk about taxing big business and taxing businesses so that they leave the country, or taxing them so that they don't leave the country. All you're doing is killing jobs. And maybe you feel fairer about it, but the fact is that Europe does not exist without the capitalism of the United States to ride on. I mean, we've been paying for the defense budgets of Europe for the last 50, 60 years. So they've been able to use all of their money on social policy, and they're still collapsing fiscally. So, I mean, the EU is going to be bankrupt in the next couple of years. So the fact that they can look at Europe and say it looks like a haven, but the reality is that Europe is a dying place, and the only reason it stayed alive this long is because it was hooked up to our lifeblood. So once we collapse, there's nobody for us to ride on. What economy are we going to ride on the back of? There is no other economy that we get to ride on the back of to kind of maintain our living standard. If we collapse, things get a lot worse than they are, even in Europe right now.
But it seems to me, not understood by a lot of people who are in support of socialism or redistribution.
Well, again, for people who are in favor of socialism or redistribution, it's about the first principle. It's not about the effect. It's not about anything except for there's a rich guy, there's a poor guy. The rich guy must have exploited the poor guy. It's unfair. And you can see this in Bernie Sanders' Twitter feed. Every single tweet is, we have to come to grips with the fact that X, and X is always something bad with the universe, right? And it's always something, generally it's something that really cannot be handled by government at all, except by crushing people. And people say, well, yeah, that looks like a problem to me. Give Bernie Sanders more power. And Bernie Sanders is fine with that. And young people, again, they don't understand why they're so wealthy. They don't understand what made America the way that it is. The educational system has convinced them that we've been successful in spite of capitalist principles, not because of them. And so they figure, okay, if we can knock out the foundations for the greatest society in the history of humanity, and the edifice won't crumble. And they don't understand. If you take a hammer to the foundations, the edifice absolutely will crumble.
Right. And they've been taught that capitalism is evil in many cases.
Right, it's immoral. It's exploitative, yeah.
Right. So
socialism, by the way, is actually evil. Socialism is the proposition that that because I'm breathing and I'm here, that you ought to give me crap. That's basically socialism.
Right.
Capitalism is the idea that I don't get to eat tonight unless I provide you with a service or good that you want. It's forced altruism.
Yes, with a gun.
Well, no, there's no gun with regard to capitalism, but with regard to socialism, there is.
That's what I mean. So, can it be turned around, do you think?
It's a long effort. I don't think that it's a 5-year effort. I think that one of the problems with conservatives in general is that we're so focused on the urgent that we forget about the necessary. So next election is the most important election we'll ever have. We've said that in 2008 and 2012 and 2004 and 2000. It's always the most urgent election because it's the one that's happening now. Right. But we tend to think, okay, well, instead of focusing on building a movement, instead of focusing on taking over institutions the way the left does with Hollywood or with education, instead what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how do we win this election, what politics do we have to shift, what policies do we have to swivel, what magic words do we have to say to win this election, and then there will be a man on a white horse who will ride in like Ronald Reagan and fix everything. Ronald Reagan didn't fix everything. He fixed some things, and then we went right back in many ways to what we had before. I mean, Barack Obama has re-implemented all of the policies of the left with a vengeance. Right. And so, there's no such thing as sort of a permanent conservative utopia. It's something that has to be fought for in every generation, as Ronald Reagan himself recognized.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, you were giving a talk in a high school near San Diego. And halfway through your talk, the administrator dismissed the students, claiming that you had crossed a line and hurt their feelings. Tell us about that. What happened?
Well, so this is another element of the whole Bernie Sandersization of young people, which is that young people have been taught that their feelings are the most important thing in the world. Reality is not important, only how you feel about reality. So if you say something that's true, but it hurts somebody's feelings, that's a microaggression requiring a trigger warning, and we have to shut it down. So what happened at Otay Ranch High School down near San Diego is I was speaking about the differences between right and left, about some of the things we've talked about here, differences between socialism and capitalism. And one of the things that I said is that if you are permanently poor in the United States, which is the freest society in history, if you're permanently poor in the United States, that is not because society is discriminating against you or treating you badly. If you're temporarily poor, it could be because your boss is a jerk, it could be because you had a bad health problem, it could be for a variety of reasons. But if you're permanently poor, if you're poor from the time that you're an adult all the way till the time that you die, the only reason that you're permanently poor in the United States, other than disability, is because you are legitimately terrible with money. That's the only reason. Because if you hold down a job, then you are not going to be poor, right? I mean, the Brookings Institute says that if you don't want to be permanently poor in the United States, do 3 things. Graduate high school, get a job, get married before you have a baby. That's it. Those 3 things, and you will not be permanently poor in the United States. So I said that, if you're permanently poor, you're by definition not good with money. And you could hear kind of the kids in the back, there's some impoverished kids in the back, and they were getting all upset about this, started kind of hissing and booing. And I said, okay, name one person in the United States, one, who's phenomenal with money, but permanently poor. Like one person. And at that point, the principal decided to step in because he says, well, these kids in the back, their parents, some of their parents are poor. And I said, so what? Like, well, what difference does that make? I mean, that's just because, it doesn't change the truth or falsity of the statement that I'm making. Right. Maybe it hurts their feelings, but maybe the fact that their feelings are hurt means that they won't pursue some of the same decisions their families have made with regard to poverty. I mean, one of the beautiful things about America is that you can see it across generations. I mean, in my family, great-grandparents get here, they have nothing. My grandparents start with almost nothing, and then they do well, and then my parents did even better than my grandparents, and I'm doing better than my parents. Generational wealth builds up, and the goal is to leave your kids off better than you yourself were when you were a kid. But for the left, and for all the people in academia and in the education system, the real key is that kids can't succeed unless they feel good about themselves. This is the surest form of BS on the planet. The fact is that people in the United States, particularly young people, have significantly too much self-esteem and significantly too little achievement. In polls, young Americans are by far the most self-esteem infused people on planet Earth. We think we're the best at math, we think we're the best at English, and then when it comes to actual performance, we lag behind half the civilized world because we are not a society that's focused on achievement anymore. We're a society that's focused on a feeling of self-possession and happiness within. And you don't deserve to have self-esteem unless you actually earn it. I believe in earned self-esteem. I don't believe in unearned self-esteem, which is what the entire basis of the left is.
So how is that going to change? This generation, the millennials today, are going in 20 years, 30 years, be running the country.
Mm-hmm. Probably sooner than that, but
maybe sooner than that.
The only way that really changes, really, is number one, you need a values revival. So religion in America is dying a very slow death because religious people, pastors, rabbis, priests, they're all doing this routine where they run away from political and values issues because they think that if they just have guitar nights and pizza, that draws young people to church. That's the stupidest thing ever. I mean, the fact is that as somebody who goes to synagogue regularly, I don't go because it's a good time. I go because it's supposed to be a font of eternal values. If I want to have a good time, I go to a movie. If I want to get eternal values, I don't. I go to synagogue. So right. the fact that the religious community has run from this, specifically to maintain nonprofit status at the hands of the government, is really quite gross. The other way is to speak to young people like they're not idiots. I mean, and not to coddle young people. I'm sick of young people being told, you're the future, whatever, you'll fulfill your dreams no matter what you do. No, you'll fulfill your dreams if you work hard and stop being a lazy ass. Right? That's how you're going to fulfill your dreams. And nobody's going to get in the way except for you. Because no one cares about you except for you. No one cares enough about you to get in your way. Right. And this idea that the world is stacked against you, I promise you, the world doesn't give two craps about you. The world doesn't spend more than 10 seconds on you. No one in the world cares about you except for your parents and your immediate family, maybe a girlfriend or boyfriend. That's it, maybe your dog. Yeah. But the fact is that because the world doesn't care about you, that's what allows you to do what you're going to do. Right? That's what you live. Everybody sort of lives in the blind spot of everybody else. Right? It's not that we're all helping each other out all the time. It's that we interact with each other when we provide each other things that we want. That's the beauty of capitalism. So this whole idea society is out to get you, society doesn't even think about you. Right. And that's good. Society shouldn't think about you. You should think about you. Yeah.
I liked what you said to one group of students. The world doesn't care about your feelings.
Yeah, that's right. Facts don't care about your feelings. The world doesn't care about your feelings. I mean, reality doesn't care about your feelings. Reality is reality. Feelings are feelings. And just because you feel negatively about something happening in the world doesn't mean that the world's at fault. Maybe you're at fault.
It's been a great discussion, Ben.
No, thanks so much.
And I appreciate your taking the time to come and be on our show and give us some of your insights.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Gary.
Thank you, Ben.